So welcome everyone to Good for a Chat. My name's Jo Taranto and I am the co-founder and managing director of Good for the Hood. And we are a social enterprise based in Sydney, which empowers ordinary people to create community change. We're absolutely passionate about people taking steps towards living more sustainably, creating stronger communities, and for really finding ways to live more simply, more healthily, and more connected with each other and with the planet. And wow, yesterday was Earth Day, so it's a very timely reminder of our connections and the challenges that we face. There's some pretty big things happening in the US around climate, some pretty big discussions happening in the world. So it's a lot. And these chats are a chance for us to get to touch base with thought leaders, experts, passionate humans who've done amazing things, people who've shared a story or created their own change in some way. I'm here today on the land of the Wallamadigal. I live in Ryde. The Wallamadigal were the snapperfish people, and I'm really lucky to live very close to both National Park and river, in a very special place to me. But I grew up in northern New South Wales on a farm, and I think as long as I can remember, I felt like there's been a connection to place, and I'm sure that you all have your own story about connection to place as well. We're going to meet someone today who's learned to find her own connections and her own space and story when it comes to sustainability, and I know that you're going to really love her. She's a bit of a ray of light. And I had the fortunate opportunity to meet her a couple of months ago digitally, because that's how we meet people these days, and certainly felt that the conversations we had would resonate with all of you as well. So we're really happy to share our second Good for a Chat. Last month we met up with Dr. Jonica Newby, and in a couple of months we have the beautiful Ronnie Khan joining us for a chat as well. So we're really excited. They won't all be women, I promise. We will bring in some men, but we're really excited about continuing these conversations. It's a really nice way of spending a Friday morning or lunchtime. And certainly it's something you can come back to or share with a friend or colleague as well. Good for the Hood is really passionate, as I said, about working with people who take community action. And we recognise that at times it's hard to access the right information and inspiration and connection with other people who do this work. It's tough stuff. And so this is a great chance, if nothing else, to also meet some other people who do this as well. I'm just going to let a couple more people in. So our wonderful guest today is Sally Flower, and her name, like her, is just a symbol of things beautiful and I guess simple. So Sally is the founder of Home Sanctuary, and she's also trained in the Marie Kondo KonMari Method. I certainly don't know. I'm calling from my garage today, which could do with a little bit of KonMari love. But Sally's a wellness consultant as much as a sustainability advocate. She's also a mindfulness coach, and she's studying her Masters of the Environment as well. So she has been working in this space for a while, and certainly has a passion for reducing consumerism. She does consultations, she helps people think about the way they live. She is really passionate about nurturing homes, and she's been on television, radio. She has a wonderful blog. She shares stories, information, and I believe she's working on something pretty exciting as well, which will be coming out later, either this year or next. We'll find out shortly. So please welcome our wonderful speaker, Sally Flower.
Good morning, Jo. Oh my gosh, that is the most lovely introduction. I feel so inspired just being
I think
here.
I called you simple. I didn't mean you're simple. I mean, you're simply just
No, I'll take any kind of simple. I want all the simplicity in my life. And I recognise a few of the faces on the screen and some of the people are dialed in. So yes, simplicity, like a beacon of our community at Home Sanctuary. So yes, that is me. I am calling from Melbourne. So I am on the Wurundjeri lands of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. It's a very important thing to really think about land and home and tradition, I think, when we talk about sustainability and home. And the more we learn and we get connected to our Indigenous culture in Australia, the more we realise how important it is to really honour the land and home. So thank you for starting.
Thank you, Sunny. No, absolutely. And how is beautiful sunny Melbourne today?
I have had the busiest morning. I've been riding my bike everywhere because I'm sure like many people on today, like we tend to avoid the car where we can. So it's a beautiful day. It's one of those beautiful autumn mornings and we're kind of getting cool nights. And I've just welcomed my newest member to my family. I had a little nephew born this week. So I'm on like happy vibes or bubbling rounds. It's so lovely to be here with you all.
That's so wonderful, Sally. Well, thank you. You have a bit of a story about how you've obviously embarked on this journey with Home Sanctuary. Can you tell us how you decided that living simply was important? Because you've lived a pretty big life and at times pretty high stress, worked in New York, for example. How did you find yourself?
I have not always been this way, that's for sure. And I actually am writing a blog, I think it's either out or I'm writing it, my publisher putting out soon, about how I never stopped, I never really was this person who limited buying things. It's really just kind of something I've moved into. So I started my career in corporate finance, and that's really high paced and busy. And with that comes a lot of affluence. And affluence is something that is really important that we talk about in communities like Australia and America, because this kind of affluent circle of consuming is what's giving so much damage to our climate, and our energy systems need to adjust for that. So I was working in finance in Australia and wanted to get into capital markets and moved over to New York City and eventually got a role there and lived the New York City life for 2 years. And I think that might have been a triggering point for me in terms of this disposable lifestyle. And we often would talk about New York City, like no one uses their kitchens in New York City, like it's a really cool thing. But then when you're actually doing it, you think to yourself every day, I really shouldn't be throwing so much out. Like everything is created to be disposable. And we talk a lot about social norms when we look at behaviour change in climate and sustainability. And these social norms of having everything as disposable and throw away was something that really didn't sit well with me. And at the same time, I was reading Marie Kondo's book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. And I'd always been a very tidy person, but this book really kind of connected with me. And I thought, this is such a cool career, like helping people get organised. Like, is that a real thing? But if anywhere it's going to be a real thing, it's going to be in New York City, because you can pay people to wrap Christmas decorations and collect your mail. So I thought I'll look into it. And 2 weeks later, Marie was going to be in New York City running her very first training in English. And I kind of went along for a bit of fun, like just something that you did when you're an expat and you're like doing fun things. And I rocked up in this tiny room full of people who were just in awe of Marie. And they had been waiting to meet her for months and months. People had flown from all over the world to meet her and still do today. And I just kind of stumbled into this world of tidy. And from there, it just kind of snowballed. I started posting pictures of Marie, and people were, when I came home to Australia, asking me to tidy their wardrobes. And I eventually got to a point, like being the businesswoman that I am, that I created Home Sanctuary as kind of like a brand for myself. Previously, before that, was like Organised Australia. I started to do 4 days a week in finance. But the whole time I was doing it, I thought, this is not really okay, me just throwing stuff out. I always felt a little bit like a doctor who was treating a symptom and not the problem. People would want to feel good and celebrate bags of things that they were throwing out, and wanted to kind of me to support them and let them know it was okay to make waste. But then I'd come home every day and think, I don't want to be helping people make waste. I want to be helping people reduce the amount of their waste that they're making while still living a life that they're happy with and fulfilled with. And that was when I started to do more of this home sanctuary kind of focus rather than just the Marie Kondo method. I ended up leaving finance to pursue and grow Home Sanctuary, and I'm currently doing my Masters of Environment and Sustainability, and boosting more of my yoga studies and meditation and mindfulness to kind of capture all of that together to support people to create homes and spaces that limit waste and allow them to live a happy and fulfilled life with what they have, but still focusing on this decluttering. It's a very weird kind of area I'm into, but I'm really trying to change the way that we view decluttering and change the way that we see organising, because I feel as though that's the only way that this industry can be anything, any kind of sustainable.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think I'm on a lot of minimalist pages, and it's like 40 bags in 40 days, and look how much I've thrown out. And whilst, you know, we can celebrate that, I understand that kind of conundrum that it's
I
like,
really struggle with that.
why?
I really struggle with this celebration of a way, and I really struggle with this every day throw one thing out and celebrate that. It really needs to be every day buy one thing less. And we talk about this a lot in, you might have heard the word greenwashing, a little bit like green marketing. We talk about this a little bit when we talk to eco kind of ways of living, that the actually most sustainable way of living is less. But we don't often get this message of less because that doesn't make anyone money. Like, no one's making money by selling less. But actually we need to change as a conscious collective community about the way that we view items in our home, the way that we view consumerism, and have a look at ourselves in affluent communities and have a bit of a reality check at the way that we're living.
And in terms of reality checks, you know, you and I have talked about this, and you're obviously doing a lot of study in this space. How are you feeling about where Australia sits in the overall climate change and climate action stage? I mean, there's a lot of focus at the moment, a lot of conversations about us as a nation and what we are or aren't doing. And how do you think that sits with the way we consume?
I actually did a podcast interview about this last week, and she asked me a very similar question. We don't tend to see ourselves as Australians as kind of big players in the world. We're like that, you know, we're a small country. We have a lot of space, but not many people live in it. We're away from everything else. Like, we'll just follow the leader. And we have been, this is our political history and our society history has been like that for a long time. But we are now consuming globally more carbon per capita than almost every other country in the world. More than China, and we're on par with America, and they will soon do better than us. So we are actually terrible. We are one of the worst, if not the worst, we have the worst climate change action of any developed nation in the world, and we have one of the highest per capita emissions above China. And when you think about it like that, it's like, oh my gosh, we really are important. And when we hear a lot of TV and the media saying that we're doing our bit, that's not really true, because we're not doing our bit. Because just because we have less people doesn't mean that we can make a small amount of action. Because we're consuming so much carbon per person, we can make a big difference. So in response to that, it's very embarrassing for me as a master's student in sustainability when I'm in a forum at the Melbourne University, and we have people from America there, people from Europe there, people from Canada there. Canadians actually aren't that good, and Australians are laughed at. And I know that that's how all of my professors feel. They've been talking about how Australia can improve for a long time. But I don't want to put a only negative light on it, like you tend to throw our hands up and walk away. We do have a lot of fatigue when it comes to climate change. And I really want to this chat today to people feel empowered of things that they can do, because this individual action is really important. And if we continue to have conversations like we are today, we will change. These policies will change, and there are things that we can do, and we have the ability as Australians to make a really big difference. And I think that I am seeing a conscious shift in the way that people think, but I'm hoping it will be it'll be a lot quicker than we can see.
Absolutely. And so what role do you think putting the onus back on individuals plays in the overall picture for Australia? If we talk to Australians about consumption and living more simply and slowing down, do you think that is a great approach for people to start thinking at home first, outside the home next? Or do you think it sometimes doesn't always play out that way for everyone?
Great question. I'm trying to give, how do I give my non-academic answer here? Because academically you could say that like having the onus on the consumer to not consume is not fair. And it isn't fair. We shouldn't be bombarded with 3,000 media advertising messages per day, which we are, and then told, by the way, don't buy. So that's not really fair. So it's not really, it's not fair for the onus to be on the consumer, but we are all global citizens and we all have a role to play. And it's more of us elevating our response to those advertising means and being able to say no before we say yes. Like our default position to purchasing should be no. And we should be able to then, you know, reevaluate through various ways of benefits, how it improves your life and doesn't have a really negative impact on the lives of others, whether you purchase it. But whether we should be making sure that we are, as consumers, if it's an active way of moving forward, I think yes, if we encourage producers, enable us to change the way that they produce their products, like change their supply chain and change their product development to be more sustainable choices. And we can do that through our purchasing behaviour. So actually changing the way how we choose, we can make a big action. I don't think it should be the only way, and we definitely need legislation and support for those businesses who are deciding to make positive change with their logistic structures and their product design, to support them and encourage them. And when we have a 2050 target, we will hopefully have mechanisms in there that support those businesses and encourage them to improve their product development. But I think that the way that we choose to buy can definitely have a positive impact, and as well as that, supporting the secondhand economy. Secondhand economy is somewhere that we're seeing a massive growth in that already, and I actually love that when I was living in the States, that, you know, purchasing secondhand clothes is really quite normal. And I'm really hoping that as this borrowing and secondhand economy will grow in Australia, and anything that you can do to encouraging secondhand. I mean, things like going to Bunnings and using their borrowing system, buying things secondhand on Facebook Marketplace, having a look at the new H&M borrowing line that's coming out, borrowing things from your friends. There's like borrowing apps online, you know, using car share, using Airbnb rather than purpose-built accommodation, all of those kind of things. If you make those choices, you're reducing your carbon, and if we all did that, it would be great.
Do you think, Sally, that when we talk about mindset when it comes to sustainability, that there's a process people have to go through of adapting to this saying no concept or changing their mindset? There is an element of potential grief or loss from maybe what they might want to buy. But do you also see that when people do change the way they live, that actually there's a real comfort and peace and simplicity in not consuming and not feeling that pressure to consume? And do you see that with your clients?
Totally. I see it with my clients all the time. With the less stuff that they're surrounded by, they feel so much better. And it's not even just taking my word for it. Like, we have good medical evidence now through psychology studies that show that when you are surrounded by stuff, you have this increased stress hormone in your system. You also have a reduced ability to focus when there's too much stuff around you. And a lot of the studies are done in women who are caring for children at home. And a lot of my clients are those who get really overwhelmed because there's so much stuff happening. And actually, we look at our Instagram and we look at the TV and it says, buy this stuff and your kids will be calmer and you'll be happier. But the reality is there's probably just going to be more stuff in the houses that's not going to make you calmer and happier. So it's it is a real shift in the way that you kind of on your simplicity journey of kind of looking around at what you have now. And it can feel really isolating. And this is something that Home Sanctuary and places like Good for the Hood are for people to come to, so it doesn't feel isolating. So that rather than comparing with your peers, which you do naturally, because that's what we do, that's how we create community. We compare and want to be like others. It's very normal for us to, find our happiness in comparison to our peers. But if we can shift that focus and rather than say buying new or needing more, talking about other things in terms of calmness, of the stuff that you're cooking at home, the reuse that you're having, and that really tends to make you feel more connected. And we have, like, internationally, like 3 or 4 million people who actively identify as part of the simplicity movement. Right. So when you choose not to buy and when you choose to have less, it may sometimes feel isolating, but you're actually connected to a really big web of people. And now through social media and this new online world, we have a way to connect. So I'm not really sure if grief for the things that you haven't bought is a thing. It's just kind of finding other ways where you can feel happy and content without those previous kind of habits and path dependencies of how you found happiness in the past. It's a new way.
I've certainly noticed myself with my own journey on lowering my own consumption, which I have to say came hand in hand with an increased awareness of global issues. Like, there's no doubt that for myself and for a lot of people we talk to, they do go hand in hand. You can't be passionate about the issues outside your home and then go home and live like a king. It just feels wrong. So
I very much hear that. For other people, it is sometimes if the climate's too hard to understand, there's other ways you can think about the health benefits and the saving money benefits. They can kind of support that. But yeah, I hear you. I felt the same. That was my journey as well.
But I certainly feel like I have noticed that the times that I've had to go and purchase something, maybe it's, for the list of stuff for my kids at school, or I've had to get something for a very specific purpose and I didn't really want to buy it the way I had to buy it. It has had this, and even walking into a supermarket, you get this overwhelming sense of, wow, abundance and shiny newness and opportunity and all those feelings that come with being exposed to that rush, really, which is what shopping is. It's why people, talk about retail therapy, I guess, right? Yeah. But it's so interesting once you've been there and you leave and that thing you bought isn't as shiny after the first wear or the first wash, or that toy's scratched, or things go to school and come home look like they've been destroyed. So I've noticed that very much, that emotional aspect of consumption. And I imagine that there's a little bit of decoupling that needs to happen sometimes. And I know you don't work specifically with hoarders, but that's it, right? There's an emotional attachment that we have to things.
There's kind of two separate bits there. So what you're describing is called the hedonic effect. So this is also a very well documented feeling and emotion of when you acquire a new item, your happiness levels go up, and then they will always go back. And I feel as though sometimes you're like, it's 10%, it's made me feel 10% better, but it might feel 10% better for just a longer period. You'll always go back down because your happiness levels, once your basic standard of living is met, so shelter, water, food, security and love, once that's met, anything after that, your feeling of happiness is in comparison to your peer group. So how you look at your neighbour and how you look at your friends at work then depends on your happiness, and your happiness will go up and then back down to where your peers are. As long as you're a little bit better than them, you're going to be feeling good. Now, this in the 50s is why we called it Keeping Up with the Joneses, because in the 50s we compared everyone to the people in our street, and the ladies stayed at home and they had the houses, and they would compare their washing equipment or whatever to the other people in the neighbourhood. Then when women started going to work, we saw a change in the way that we compare our peers from the people on our street to the people that we work with. So then everyone in our community started to compare with those they went to work with. So if you were, doctors and lawyers, you compared with the lawyers in your law firm. If you were school teachers, you could compare with them. So after that, we tend to see this growing, the Joneses really spread into the more industrial areas of our community. And then it's what we call the affluent treadmill. So it's kind of like I purchase and then I get to here and I go up. And then I purchase a bit more and I come up. So what we find now is that everyone in a developing established nation with a lot of money, like Australia, we're on an affluent treadmill. So we just purchase a little bit more to feel happier in comparison to our peers. And you look at it, what I have now as a 33-year-old woman compared to what my mother had as a 33-year-old woman is huge. Now, what is my child at 33 going to have? A floating car and 5 houses? Who knows? Hopefully not. We'll change it by then. But this kind of growth treadmill is what that hedonic effect is. So that's that you feel great, and all of the advertising and all of the emotions that you feel that the companies have made to create and make you feel good elevates this hedonic effect. But you will always come back down. And that's really hard to kind of think, because I'm like, if we're looking to get a new car this, in the next few years, I'm trying to save to get a full EV rather than just a hybrid. But I still know that even if I get a bigger car, after 6 months of having it, I'll go back to the same happiness I was before. Even though it does sound silly, it's exactly what will happen. The other part to talk about with that hoarding thing is that we tend to have extra things in our homes because we've been told a lot of the advertising is based on detriment. So essentially telling you that you are lacking in this area or that, and having this thing will make you feel better. You're lacking in your ability to control your dog running around the house, so buy them this special dog toy. And that's kind of what so when we get something, we're being told that we're not really doing something very well, and the product will make us feel better. So that's how we tend to hold on to them, because this will make us do better and feel better. So then when letting that go, it can be a little bit hard because we're taking away something that hasn't really worked correctly. But the hoarding process is a psychological disorder where the individual feels that the items are an extension of themselves. Yes. So I have some clients like that, but a lot of people have hoarding tendencies, and it's to do with their individual self-awareness.
Yeah, and it's a whole nother world. I think when I first asked, I talk to anyone who does organising. I am one of those people who love watching those hoarding shows, because it's terrible voyeurism, and it's actually quite sad thing to look into someone's very personal challenges and sort of go, oh, what are they doing and how do they live? But I think it's fascinating as an exercise of consumption. Obviously it's a mental health issue, but it's kind of like it's a mental health issue which is absolutely fed by our that messaging. So it's on the end of that spectrum. And I know so many people, and I'm sure you see it all the time, who are not full-blown hoarders, but they really struggle with letting go of things.
I think people definitely struggle to let go of a lot of things. It's because of this consumerism culture we're created. Now we have this additional messaging of waste is bad and landfill is growing. So I'll just keep it in my house because I don't want to add to landfill. So we also have this complexity as well.
Yes, we really do. And I know a lot of people who don't like having the extra stuff, but because they can't find a sustainable way to dispose of it, like me, they'll keep it in their car for 3 weeks, or it'll sit in their garage until they can find the right way to get rid of it. So I absolutely recognize that, and I can relate. We're going to take some questions now, Sally. If people are feeling brave and they want to either put up their hand or turn their camera on, and maybe even just put their hand up to the camera when they're wanting to say something. But I've got one question that's come through already from Fiona, who's asked, what advice you'd say give to someone with primary school children who want the latest technology all the time? And there's this real need almost, and nagging to say, hey, I need this new app, or I need this new device, or there's this new toy that's come out and I need to have it because all my friends have it. Do you see that as a symptom, obviously, with younger people, Sally? And is there a way that we can help kind of manage that so that they don't grow up with this aspiration to always have that new thing all the time?
Yeah. There's actually been a little bit of work done around advertising for children, and there's been some really cool children's childhood psychologists who have put forward papers to a government to legislate marketing to children. Because as an adult, the marketing we understand as separate from us. We see it as we're being told, and we can sometimes laugh at it. You know, used car sales is a classic example. We have a laugh about it. Kids, because as they're growing up, primary school in particular, they don't understand the difference between what's reality and what's not sometimes. So they don't really, it's very hard for them to differentiate between that's being sold to me, but I don't need it, because that identity isn't there. And it obviously as the children get younger, it's a lot harder. So the first thing I would say is just to recognise that difference in maturity of being able to understand when something is being, sold to us as good for us and really is good for us. So a little bit of like understanding that kind of psychology level kind of can make us feel a bit better. That's the first thing I'd say. Second thing, children work really well with boundaries in terms of tidying and the amount of things that they can have. It just helps to make things physically understand. So I often say to people with boxes of toys or Lego, the kid can have 3 boxes. And if they're nagging you at the supermarket for a new box, you can say, great, we can have that for your birthday or whatever, or ask Granny for Christmas. But you still have to make sure it fits in your box. So have a look at what you've got now, and you can make space for the new one. So with technology, you can add the same kind of rules that apply to that, but with like a non-tangible surrounding. So if it's all of the apps, it'd be like you're allowed to have 5 apps. So if you want to let go of one, you've got to let it go before you get the next one. So they have to have a choice, or it could be a budget. You can have $20 a year to buy on apps, then they'll have to start making these decisions. So then you're supporting them to understand that there is a limited number of things that they can have. They start to get this sense of stuff. If they are environmentally minded, you could talk about, we don't want to create that waste. If you wanted to do that, it can be a little bit hard for a child to understand. That could be a bit too much. And then I would just offer other avenues in terms of, can we buy this one with a friend and borrow it, or can you take it for a particular time during the year that, if your birthday or for Christmas, and you'd have to do that for something else. I'm not really sure if there is a kind of panacea to how to stop kids to say they want stuff. It's definitely an aspect of giving them boundaries, and you need to work out what those boundaries are for you. You need to stick to them. Yeah. And you need to also come in there with a bit of compassion and understand that they are on a completely different maturity level in terms of advertising than we are.
I think that whole 1 in, 1 out concept has been really valuable as an adult, and I think such a wonderful skill to learn early, because I think we don't really always recognize that there is actually a limit.
Yeah, and you'll often find that they probably don't want to let one go. So if well, great, that means, then say to them, well, that means that you're really happy with the toys that you have now. That's great. Let's just focus on how much you love these and play with them.
Yeah. All right, I've got another question for you, Sally. It's about tidying. Is there any hope for Harriet, who is a self-confessed, hopelessly untidy person? She said she doesn't have a stuff problem. She just feels like she has bad habits. Any help? And I think all our ears are pricked up. We're like, give us your best tidying habits.
She doesn't have a stuff problem. She has bad habits. Okay. So habits are the number one way to change behavior. I'm doing a subject in this at the moment. So the habits are changeable. So I'm not sure exactly what this particular habit of yours it is, whether it's a purchasing habit or whether it is a discarding habit, you're not comfortable anything goes, or whether it's you like new shiny things, or you have collections that you purchase. I'm not sure exactly what the habit is, but habits are breakable and changeable, and are the biggest way to make behavior change. really the best way to change a habit is to make you need to change your situation quite quickly. You need to be able to put yourself in a different situation where that habit comes up. So you would need to observe the behavior that you do and work out why you're doing it. Like, what is a situation that makes me do this? Is it because...
I've got a clarification from Harriet. It's being too busy and rushing from one thing to another without tidying the thing up before.
Also putting things away, putting things down. So,
or as I'd like to call it, a chronic dumper, which is what I do.
A chronic dumper,
yes. So I put that there, I put this here, I walk away, and it's because I'm rushing all the time.
Yeah, I wouldn't classify that as a habit. That's not a habit. That would be probably to do with the logistical setup of your space. Ooh, so for chronic dumpers, you need to limit your dumping spaces, and you need to give everything in your house a home. And this often means reducing the amount of stuff that you have so everything has a home, and anything new that you bring into your space that you give a home to very quickly. And then you need to dedicate 30 minutes to a day to put those things away. And it's quite funny, this word busy, because there is this phenomenal time management expert called Laura Volkowitz and Greta Gretchen. Anyway, I can find them, so put it in show notes.
You can find it and let people know.
Yeah. So these two women talk about busyness and time, and they say that time is elastic. So if you have extra things that you have to get done in your day, you'll just find time to do them. So when you're saying that I'm too busy to do things, it essentially means you're not prioritizing putting things away, because you've created barriers to do that. Barriers mean they don't have a home, and because you're actually not understanding the value yet. Because for me, even if it's 10:30 and I have to, and I'm a 9:30 in bed person, 10:30 is very late for me. If I will still use 10 minutes to put things away, because I know that sets my day up better the next day, because I have understood that feeling of the value of it. So I think that the chronic dumping needs removing the barriers as to why it's happening, and then reprioritizing what busyness is.
I love the idea of resetting as well, because you are going to create a bit of mess. Like, life is messy, right?
Totally.
But
my house today is messy.
But giving you a chance to reset so that you can continue the next day or the next, from lunchtime or whenever it is. That I love that. That's a really valuable process. We've got another question here from Carrie. How do you think we can replace the hedonic effect you described from buying new things with the similar rush we assume that you get from buying something secondhand? How can we get to a place where time-poor people will check a community swap spot or an op shop or drive before driving somewhere else, maybe the shopping centre? Do you think, this is a long question, do you think there's a yuck factor to overcome when it comes to secondhand? Or if it's in the too hard basket because it just takes longer and you may not find exactly what you want?
Yeah, okay. There's a few good parts in there. So firstly, replacing the hedonic factor, we need to come back to, when you talk about this rush of getting something new, what is that fulfilling? And here's where my yoga studies come in, and we talk about self-acceptance and what exactly we're trying to add value to. So for me, for example, at the moment, I really want one of those new Dyson hair dryers, which is ridiculous. I don't need it, but for some reason, I feel as though I really want it. And if I actually have a think about it, why do I really want it? It's because my sister-in-law has it, and I reckon that we're the same. My sister-in-law and I are both successful, young, strong women. If she has it, why can't I have it? And that is actually that affluence balance. So I have to now actively work against desiring that rush because of my natural review, and I want to replace it with another kind of feeling that I see my sister-in-law and I, that she's actually not here because she's got a $400 hairdryer, that we're still equally wonderful, strong women, but I need to find something else to replace that rush.
Okay.
And I think it's that kind of that hedonic rush replacement. We can find with secondhand, but it's more about the thrill of the find. Now, that thrill that you get from finding a vintage handbag in Salvos for $15 that you know is more like $35.
Yeah.
And this kind of yuck feeling, that'll go away. Because it's more about, I think maybe you get used to it or you just get over it. And that's a cultural shift.
Yeah.
So almost everything I wear now is secondhand.
100%.
And I just, that kind of weird yuck feeling has gone after probably 6 years of buying that way. I do think. And
I think you're right. I think to Carrie's point, that I think once we recognise that just because something's shiny and new, it doesn't mean it's, you know, any more kind of prestigious, really. In fact, I find now, and I think that's come the shift, that, you know, I'm wearing this beautiful jacket, which if I bought retail would be $600. I think I got it for $30. It was brand new. It might be 5 seasons ago. I don't know. To be honest, you'd never, even if you told me, I wouldn't know, because I'm a bit of a fashion, numpty. But I think.
Me too.
Yeah, but I think that doesn't matter. I kind of look at the value of the fact that this is a beautiful wool coat that was, you know, has been designed in, you know, overseas, and that it's got value that I maybe would never, and I certainly would never have been able to purchase it retail. So I think that's really interesting, because obviously perception and convenience is so important to.
That convenience question is also a really good one about it's just easier. My parents are eBay buyers. They love it. They're the baby boomers, so they're not really on the simplicity bandwagon, but they love the simplicity of buying things online. So it's almost just kind of working out what. And here is when, as a global community, we don't calculate in environmental impact. So it's simplicity for us because we're not calculating the environmental impact of the packaging, the carbon produced from creating that product. As soon as we start to calculate in the cost of carbon through a carbon tax, everything would change the way that we view cheap and simple, because we will then support the businesses that are doing the right thing. And here is where we come back to that, like, can the consumer do it alone? We really can't do it without some kind of policy to support those businesses doing the right thing. So it's really hard as a consumer because we don't calculate in the right environmental impacts.
Now, I know you have to go to university soon. So
actually 1 o'clock, so I have some time.
All right, good. Well, we got 2 more questions. And Harriet said thank you so much. So did Carrie, so did Fiona. So that's wonderful. I think you've already helped a few people today, which is great. So we had a lovely question from Sharon about, she says, I find that allowing my child to be responsible for the purchasing choice with guidance is really important. My child's just turned 11. He's often gifted money from his grandparents, and we talk about special saving goals, and he's often tempted to want things or ask for things as they pop up. And when I say if he can buy it, if he really wants it, if he's got money, he'll change his mind quite quickly if it's his money rather than mine, which is great, as you sort of said, about having a savings goal. I think this is actually a comment, not a question, but that's great. It's very helpful, Sharon. I also encourage him to think about it for a week or 2, and if he still really wants it, it helps avoid those impromptu things. So great advice from Sharon. I think, Sharon, you got potential to be a consultant of your own there. There's some really great skills and tips. We got a question from Emma. So Emma wants to know if there's any advice for parents to avoid buying all the unnecessary stuff for a new baby. This is a great one. Wow, do we go crazy when we decide that there's a baby that needs to come into the house and all the things. And you've obviously, you know, as an aunt, probably see this as well at the moment.
I've had like 5 new babies in my life in the last year.
So what is it about baby that makes
there's a few stuff. Gifting stuff. There's a few ways you can do it. The first way is just to do a little bit of avoidance. And this is kind of a little bit like conscious consumption as well, is kind of like, you know, you can also avoid advertising as much as you can. There's actually a few parts in here. So avoiding advertising. So I would really encourage anyone, if they could kind of not to go into baby bunting, or if you do, do your shopping list. So you're going in there looking for things, because then we have that, you know, it is a little bit more convenient going into Berry Bunting because it's all there and you can do it in 30 minutes rather than, you know, 5 hours, you know, wandering down Berkeley Street Mall or whatever. So yeah, so go in the shopping list. And I always like to kind of step back in time a little. Like, I, as a child, was raised without all the gadgets, without a night light that flicked on in certain minutes and didn't measure the time. And I'm sure that most of us on the call here have lived an okay life without all the gadgets. So it's just a little bit of like, get a bit of a reality check. Am I talking here the stuff that I need? Do I need that to raise my child in a healthy situation, or do I need it based on my community affluence? And my guess is probably the first one. So definitely kind of look at it, step back in time, like, well, you know, would I have done this 20 years ago? Probably not.
And I think, I don't know about anyone else, but I think when you're a new mum, there's a lot of anxiety and you think, well, maybe I do need this thing. I don't know. How will I know? What if the baby arrives and I need it and I don't have it? And, you know, so that fear.
Yeah.
So I would say, Emma, my advice from someone who's been there is just speak to people who are sensible about what they actually used. And that is really powerful, because they'll go, oh, I don't get one of those things. They were a waste of time, you know. So, and the good thing about it is, because of where we live, different if you lived in, you know, remote country New South Wales, but if you're living in Sydney or Melbourne or any major area, you can always get that thing, and you can get that thing pretty quickly. So don't panic. Don't panic. All right, Sharon. Oh, look at Sharon, she's just all over this. I like to gamify things and make trade-offs for myself. And she said there's a great approach by Annie and Adam of The Art of Frugal Hedonism. We can check that out at frugalhedonism.com. Sharon, you're amazing. Sally, it has been such a wonderful time to talk to you this morning. I feel like we've all been able to get something to take away from today, if not a little bit of inspiration to maybe go and sort out that mess over there. Perhaps think about Carrie's got
a piece of messy desk there. Thanks, Carrie. That's great. I feel the same.
So, look, what advice would you have for people from today if they want to find out more potentially about what they can do at home, if they're interested in reading more about you or understanding what you do, or if they want to stay in touch when you have something very exciting to announce later this year?
I definitely jump on homesanctuary.com.au and sign up to our newsletter if you haven't already. I am sending out newsletters every fortnight, and we have just launched, it's kind of coming out now, our new programs, and there is a 10-week virtual program which you can log in. So we do like virtual consulting like this, and I work with my clients. It's like 10 sessions. It's like 10 weeks, and you can, I kind of get you sorted in however you need in terms of sustainability, decluttering, downsizing, whatever it is. And then we also have the packages for in-home as well. And the in-home, it includes textile recycling and selling advice, which is super exciting. So those ones are out now if you want to work with me. I also have the option of just having like a one-off 90-minute chat, and we can answer and talk through a lot of questions like this, and you can, take a few really good nuggets away from those, those sessions with me to kind of add into your home. But definitely follow me on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn if you're a LinkedIn person, because there's definitely things I'm always sharing all the time. And if there's any big nugget to take away from today, it is just think before you buy, because what you can do with less by just choosing less is huge. So don't underestimate your ability to make decisions by buying less rather than buying an eco product.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Sally, thank you for joining us on Good for a Chat, and thank you everyone. We will be in touch with more of these. If you enjoyed this, invite your friends to the next one. As I said, we've got the gorgeous Ronnie Khan coming up later in the year. If you've got an idea for a speaker, We've got some really gorgeous people on our list, so we're really excited because we feel like there's so much out there for everyone to tap into, and we're certainly not alone. And Sally, thank you for helping us feel like we're not the only crazy conscious consumers in the world, and that actually life can be pretty beautiful when we choose to live more simply.